Hello. Hello, this is the My Artifact episode number 3700. Sorry. 3794. Today's date is January 2nd, 2025. 26, sorry. 3rd of January 2026. It's been almost like a evening at 6:17 p.m. Okay, yeah. First of all, why am I recording Artifact at this time? Usually I record Artifact in in a morning, in a night. Usually in the evening at this time, I usually go to the workout and things like that. But the problem is that I want to go to the workout. I want to go to the ground and kind of like a run and play the badminton and things like that. But I put my vehicle or I put my bike into the service station and they will return my bike at 8 p.m. and things like that. And another thing is that I called my friend, but he doesn't really have also bike too. He was also coming with his kind of like a I don't know, he doesn't really have bike. So I think it's meant to be dropped. And another thing is that I have some sort of stuff at home to do. Stuff at home like basically माझ्या मोठे वडिलांच्या घरी कार्यक्रम आहे. There is some sort of celebration actually happened at my मोठे वडील's place. Okay, so that's why I have to go there. Whatever. Alright, yeah. I don't know. Why I'm kind of like feels a little bit of weird to kind of like simply record. Like I'm not kind of like simply get into that particular zone and things like that. I don't know why. It just feels like that I'm kind of like fumbling probably. Yeah. Am I English is kind of like good or not? Like I'm kind of like speak really good English. Probably. I'm not really sure about that. How do I supposed to kind of like judge my English? Is that key? I am not a kind of like somebody come from the English country speaking. I'm not come from English speaking country. Okay, sorry. And whatever the English that I'm speaking right now, this is all because of I did practice. I talk to myself like this in Artifact, so that's some kind of like talking that well, but still it's not good and it's not enough. Okay, there are so many things to improvement and things like that. And another thing is that now why I'm kind of like fumbling at the moment is because of that I was kind of like somebody consuming some kind of like a content, okay, on YouTube platform regarding about AI and things like that. And I wanted to talk about that particular stuff. Okay, and I don't know, sometimes I just realize that like basically this thing I wanted to do some sort of thing in my life. Okay, yeah. Now basically this thing I wanted to do some sort of thing in my life. Okay, yeah. That meant for my life is kind of like make my life better and things and that. Okay, yeah. But when I kind of like imagine my future, then I realize that the future is not only kind of like add value in my life or make my life really good and things like that. I'm actually seeing that how much it kind of like add value in people's life too and things like that. It's a kind of like a thing that imagine that you have a kind of like a simply water. Okay, yeah. And basically because of you have a water, you are kind of like a simply like a living and things and that. Okay, yeah. Now you realize that what if I would kind of like give this water to this planet Earth, then probably life would be kind of like somebody emerge and things and that. So if I give this water to the planet Earth, then probably yeah, like everyone kind of like getting life and things and that. Like it's kind of like a things that I get it. It's very hard to kind of like compare that because water is a kind of like a very essential source. It's a kind of like a very essential source for the life and things like that. What kind of like a stuff that you are kind of like giving as compared to the water, like basically water is a kind of like ultimate essential for all the living human things, all the living things. Okay, yeah. No, obviously I shouldn't supposed to be compare my thing to kind of like somebody as compared to the water and things like that, but somewhat something you would I'm just like I don't know, I just kind of like exaggerate something like that. Whatever, let's just jump. I don't know why. I just kind of like simply wanted to record Artifact. I just wanted to talk about this particular stuff. Okay, yeah. Did I already talk about this stuff in a previous artifact episode? I'm not really sure, but I did, and I want to talk about it more. Okay, yeah, I'm not really sure how much I talk and things like that, but I don't know. Okay, let's just get into the point. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I want to make Adam simulation. Now, what is exactly Adam simulation and what is that? Okay, so Adam simulation is a AI, okay, like ChatGPT, Gemini. It's also AI too, okay, yeah, but it's not meant for kind of like some daily purposes and things like that. No, Adam simulation is only one thing that it should supposed to be do is simulate. Is kind of like a simulate the thing. Now, what is exactly the simulation? A simulation means like that a kind of like a simply a virtual place where you could kind of like a simply train your kind of like a physicality or things for that. Like example, okay, yeah, let's just say that you wanted to be a kind of like a simply boxer. Okay, you wanted to be a kind of like a boxer and things like that, and you wanted to kind of like a simply like a play in Olympic and things like that. I'm not really sure boxer is actually available in, yeah, boxer is actually, yeah, boxing is actually existing in the Olympic, yeah. So basically you wanted to kind of like a simply win the gold medal in the Olympic game. Okay, yeah, so you have to be prepared, right? So how do you supposed to be prepared? You have to do exercise and things and that and that. Okay, yeah, all right, okay. Now after you do exercise, you are kind of like a very equipped with all those things. How would you supposed to be know that would you supposed to you will gonna fight with that particular another athletic from another country and things like that? So how do you supposed to do this thing? You have to practice like a fighting. Okay, yeah, means like that ki whatever you learn or whatever the training that you have, you utilize that training and kind of like all the resources to kind of like assembly such an environment where you have your own kind of like assembly boxing arena, where there is a particular person who is a kind of like assembly giving you the exact similar resistance as equivalent to a kind of like Olympic level of resistance, and he will gonna fight with you. Okay, a kind of like a, yeah, do you understand? And that particular person will kind of like a you fight with this thing, and when you do this thing you kind of like a learn and things like that, because you what kind of like a mistake that you do. Now this environment, it's called simulation. Okay, yeah, in this particular simulation you try, you fail. Like example is this thing, you are kind of like a boxing match and you have kind of like a technique that what if I could bend like this and hit like that, then probably it would be kind of like a really good. Okay, yeah, it would add points and stuff like that, right? Now you learn this thing, you kind of like a practice, you do this thing, but you fail. You realize that when you try to do this thing, the opponent understands this technicality and probably he will kind of like a hit you back, because you're another kind of like a things arbitrarily vulnerable, or maybe this technicality is not feasible because opponent might gonna understand. Okay, so what is exactly is this thing? Let's just imagine a Olympic game is a kind of like a real match will gonna happen. Like Olympic game will decide that ki how good is you are and things and that and that. But before that, whatever the kind of like assembly the training that you do, like in the boxing arena or kind of like a fighting with another people or things like that, like another, not another people, another kind of like a boxing athlete, they are kind of like a help you, your coach or things like that, that how do you supposed to bend and things and that, so that you make mistake, you learn from mistakes and you try not to do that mistake again, and then you figure out the things and that you make mistake, try not to do that mistake, learn from it, make mistake, try not to do that mistake. This is what kind of like a things. Okay, yeah, that's why you became kind of like a stronger every single time. That's why you have to spend so much amount of time in arena. All right, yeah, so this is called simulation. Understand? A simulation means like that you try, you fail, you try, you fail, you try, you fail. That is called kind of like a something a possibility. Okay, yeah, in kind of like a something in systematic way of, or kind of like a technical way that I wanted to explain is a possibility. Now what is exactly the possibility? Possibility means like that ki now in the boxing arena everything kind of like depends on kind of like how much you move and things and that, and it's kind of like everything happens so fast. So probably the possibility, this scenario might not, it's not very difficult, it's very difficult to understand in the boxing arena. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna take you kind of like another example so that you might gonna understand regarding about the possibility. Now what is exactly the possibility? A possibility means like that ki, let's just imagine a scenario. Okay, yeah, you are kind of like simply going to the office. Okay, yeah, now there are so many things will gonna happen. Let's just say you have to kind of like you have to arrive at office at almost like a 9 a.m. Okay, yeah, and you have kind of like a presentation at 10 a.m. in front of the chairman of the company. So how do you supposed to do this thing? Okay, yeah, you have to be wake up. Okay, yeah, you have to be wake up at 6 a.m. kind of like a fresh, do some sort of little bit of kind of like a workout and things like that, kind of like a somebody make breakfast or kind of like eat the breakfast, and kind of like a somebody at 8 a.m. you have to leave your house and go to the kind of like office. It will take kind of like a 45 minutes to reach to the office. You arrive at office at 8:45. Okay, yeah, you punch in, you biometric scan, you went inside, then you are kind of like a take a coffee, talk with your colleague and things, prepare little bit that ki what should you supposed to say in front of the chairman and things like that. At sharp 10 a.m. you kind of like did the presentation in front of the chairman or anything regarding about the sale and things and that. Now this is kind of like a simple scenario. Okay, yeah, kind of like everything is actually happened according to it, simple kind of like a things. But there are so many things that actually happened during this scenario. What is actually is this thing? What if you are kind of like you didn't really wake up early, like let's just say you kind of like wake up at 8:30 a.m. Now what will gonna happen? Now entire scenario will gonna shift it very differently. You might not gonna do any kind of like a breakfast. Like basically if you kind of like wake up at 8:30, then probably what should you supposed to do is that you just brush your teeth, take the kind of like a cab or things like that, go into the office, punch as quickly as possible as you can, because obviously the travel distance time cost times and things and that. So you might gonna arrive at office at maybe 9:30, and you have kind of like only 10 minutes or maybe 20 minutes remaining to kind of like prepare yourself to kind of like do the presentation and things like that. And you might not gonna do the presentation, which will gonna impact your life in further future. Okay, yeah, this is all actually happen is because of you wake up at 8:30 a.m. Okay, scenario number one. Scenario number two is that basically you wake up at 6 a.m. but because of kind of like a traffic and things like that, you might not arrive in the office. You arrive at the office at maybe kind of like assembly 9:45. Things fucked up too, right? Yeah. Or else there are millions of consequences will gonna happen to kind of like assembly do this thing. So what is exactly this thing? That is called kind of like a possibility. Okay, yeah, there are multiples of millions of possibility will gonna happen, that kind of like assembly things. Like, do you understand now? Like this possibility happened, this possibility happened, this possibility happened. Like basically this will gonna happen tomorrow. Like tomorrow I have to do a presentation, but there are multiples of possibility will gonna happen. Like basically one possibility is that I have to wake up and do my things, so that I would supposed to be do my kind of like assembly meeting in front of the chairman at 10 a.m. Okay, yeah, one possibility, another possibility, another possibility, another possibility, and each possibility kind of like a rely on so many level. Okay, rely on kind of like if I wake up at late, or maybe traffic, or maybe kind of like something that the lift elevator is not working. There are so many consequences will gonna happen and things like that. Okay, yeah. So do you understand? That is called possibility. Okay, yeah, this possibility, this possibility, this possibility, this possibility. Okay, yeah, that is called possibility. Now get it? Now what does kind of like a something that possibility is? What exactly is this thing? This possibility is a kind of like a somebody understand in the simulation point of perspective. Means like that in the simulation, simulate like I'm using a very technicality in here. Simulation the process where each possibility system or scenario or kind of like a simulation learn from that possibility, that what would supposed to be a wrong will gonna happen, and how do you supposed to be kind of like a simply learn from it and things and that. Example is this thing: if the possibility second that if I wake up late, then probably what kind of like a consequences will gonna happen, then probably all those consequences are actually written in the kind of like assembly each simulation, that if you choose this possibility, then entire scenario or entire kind of like a simulation went to fail, because this is not really good possibility. Why? Because you wake up late and things and that and that. Now basically what kind of like a best possibility that it should supposed to be matter is that you have to be kind of like a simply focus on that you have to wake up at early at 6:30 or 6 a.m. Then you have to do kind of like a workout, then do breakfast, make breakfast, go to the office, things and that. This possibility would kind of like somebody does not create any chaos and things like that. So this possibility will kind of like a finalize and simulation will get succeeded, because if you choose this possibility, right? Yeah, but there is a problem over here. What kind of like a problem? Okay, yeah. Now all those possibility that I told you are kind of like a simply not really fixed, or maybe a kind of like a things that now I said this thing. Like I said means what? Like basically I said this na ki if I wake up kind of like assembly at 8:30 a.m., or if I say this thing that ki traffic will gonna happen and things like that. Like I kind of like a saying this thing na, I am saying how does kind of like a machine will understand, how does machine will kind of like a create the possibility. It's just okay. Now this thing is kind of like a bit more difficult. I'm very hard to kind of like assembly hard to explain this thing, but I'm trying to explain. Okay, a simulation process is that ki a scenario, in particular scenario, you are not only control one character, you are actually controlling multiple character or every character in that particular scenario. Okay, okay, it's very like a, let's just imagine a stuff. Okay, also it's very hard to explain, but I am trying to explain as simple as possible. And okay, let me explain. Okay, so 15 August 1947, I'm belong to the India, and India is actually independent at this date. Okay, 15th of August 1947. Okay, now basically is this thing when the India is actually kind of like established as a country and things like that in front of the world. Okay, after the 250 years of kind of like some slaveries and things and that, which is like a basically really not good for India and things like that. Okay, now at that time the government of the India have kind of like a multiples of problem they are facing. First of all, problem is that hunger, we don't really have food. Starvation, people actually die because of the not having the food and things like that. Okay, multiples of problem. Okay, people are not have that much amount of money to spend and things and nothing really at all. Okay, like when we kind of like establish India as a country, we have kind of like so many problems regarding about how do we supposed to face and things and that. These are kind of like a multiple problem. Now another problems too, because of India is a kind of like a very diverse country, or various kind of like ethnicity of the people are kind of like a living in here. Different kind of like religious people, different religious language of the people are also living here too. Okay, with their have own independent, with they have their kind of like a unique histories and things and culture and things like that. In that particular period of time, you have to understand that you are the government of the India. Okay, and these are kind of like a problem that you have. Okay, first problem, starvation, hunger, these are the problem that obviously it has. Okay, and you have to face that problem, one thing. But another problem is that you have to make your country united. And why it will not gonna be united? Because of that you have different ethnicity of the people, different religions of the people, different language speaking of the people too. They have their own history, cultures and things and that. And basically in historical point of perspective is this thing that every different ethnicity of the people or every different speaking language of the people have kind of like a create their own country and things like that, which kind of like a really not good for India, because India is a kind of like a very diverse country and things and that. So at that time, if you are imagine yourself in 1947, you are the government of the India, what kind of like a assembly solution that you will gonna establish? Obviously you are kind of make sure that everyone should supposed to be get food first. Okay, another thing is that कि you want that कि your country should supposed to be intact. Like it shouldn't supposed to be kind of like assembly things that कि civil war happened and probably you break the country in half. Right? And this there are so many possibility at that time, because at that time starvation, casteism, there are a lot of things that actually happen at that time. Okay, yeah, and probably at that time the people who are kind of like running the government at that time, they are kind of like simply very much scared that will be this country will be kind of like intact for at least like a next 50 year or what, because they are kind of like simply really not sure about their future and things like that. So how do supposed to be do how should we supposed to be kind of like a make sure that ki country should supposed to be intact, country should supposed to be kind of like a something that ki basically is this thing that ki civil war will not gonna happen or things are that. So how do we supposed to kind of like do this thing? How do we supposed to make our country as a kind of like a unified country that people will not kind of like do the civil war or kind of like make the another country or things and that, because it was kind of communal tension and things like that. So how do we supposed to do this thing? If I am a kind of like a government of the India in 1947, so what would I supposed to do? What kind of like a choices do I have? Okay, if you still not really understanding this thing, it's a kind of like a geopolitical perspective. Imagine that you are a kind of like a somebody father and you have a kind of like a something, let's just say no, you are a kind of like a somebody class teacher. Okay, yeah, you are the class teacher, and in the classroom there are almost like a 60 different kind of like a somebody people. Okay, and those 60 people are kind of like a very crazy in their own thing. They are kind of like a speak very different language or things or that. They are kind of like a create and chaos and stuff like that. So how do you supposed to kind of like a make them silence? How do you supposed to teach them some sort of lesson? Obviously you have to control that particular people, right? Kind of like a show little bit of authority. Okay, yeah, like basically let them teach that listen to me. Okay, yeah, this is the only way that you should supposed to be, people should supposed to be listen. But how? Okay, how do you supposed to kind of like assembly the kind of like assembly provide the control? Okay, yeah, like you gonna hit everybody? Like basically you will have kind of like a chadi and things like that shut up and everyone will gonna shut up. Like basically it might gonna work if you have weapon and things like that. But in India, a country, if I'm kind of a government of India, how would I supposed to be weapon? How do I supposed to use the weapon? Because it's not really good. Like basically is saying, if I'm the government of the India and if I wanted to control all the people from all around the like all the people from the country, so I'm gonna use weapon to kind of like assembly showing the authority that I am the government of the India, fucking listen to me. Okay, yeah, if I would do that thing, it will gonna create even more chaos. Okay, yeah, because whenever the country utilize the weapon to kind of like control their citizen, it creates chaos. It kind of like a pump up really badly. So how do we supposed to do this thing? How do we supposed to kind of like make sure that in the classroom everyone should supposed to be listen to me? How do we supposed to do this thing? By providing a kind of like assembly control. Now, what is exactly control means what? Okay, how is exactly is this thing? Now, okay, now imagine I'm gonna take a kind of like a simple classroom example so that you might gonna understand a little bit better. Then you proceed to the country level. Okay, yeah. Now imagine you are a kind of like a teacher. You have a 60 people in front of you. People, I'm not saying children. 60 legit people. Okay, they are also kind of equivalent to your age, or maybe some people are kind of like somebody more of your age too. Okay, some people are kind of like a bit more smarter and things and that. Every person is kind of like a very different. Okay, now how do you supposed to kind of like a show authority? How do you supposed to do this thing? How do you supposed to show authority or kind of like a control and authority? How do you supposed to do this thing? And without using any kind of like a weapon or any kind of like a things or thing, how do you supposed to do this thing? By kind of like a limiting the sources. Now, how do you supposed to limit the sources? Now, I'm gonna take the classroom example. What should you supposed to do is that you gonna kind of like a close the door. Okay, yeah. No one will gonna like I will gonna close the door, lock the door, and I will have a key in my pocket. Okay, yeah. Now I am actually in front of the classroom. That if everyone want to go bathroom or things like that, then everyone should supposed to come to me, ask permission, then I will kind of like give the permission, then I will open the lock, and then that particular person will go into the bathroom. Okay, yeah. Now basically for a period of time, obviously no one kind of like simply going to the bathroom and things like that. But after a couple of hours, yes, people wants to go to the bathroom and things like that because they cannot hold. So basically they will come to me, ask my permission, then I will open the lock, and that particular person will go into the bathroom, right? Okay, one way of control. Another way of control is that key basically is this thing. I will control the kind of like a light board or kind of like a fan board. Okay, let's just say there is a kind of like a switch which kind of like a turn on the light, which turn on the fan. Okay, yeah. So what should I supposed to do is that if all the people are kind of like a create and chaos and things like that, what do I supposed to do is that I will kind of like a turn off the light and turn off the fan, and that board is actually in my control. Okay, yeah. So this is the way. If you don't shut up, then probably I will turn off the light and things like that. Hello. Okay, sorry about the disturbance. Okay, yeah, whatever. I'm kind of like a somebody talking very good example. Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, that key first way of control is that key basically you kind of like a lock the room. Okay, lock the classroom, and if the people ask you permission, then they will ask you permission, they will ask my permission, then I will open the lock and things like that. This is the one way of control. Another way of control, if the chaos happened, like if all the people in the classroom, they are kind of like a somebody create chaos, kind of like a shouting at each other and things and that, I will turn off the light and fan. Okay, yeah. Obviously the classroom kind of like a became hot and things like that. I will only turn on the light and fan if all the people are kind of like a stay silence and things like that. Okay, yeah. If the people are kind of like a create and chaos, then probably I will not gonna do this thing. But probably this implementation should supposed to be kind of like a do in classroom, which will be kind of like considered as a okay. But in country level, if you do this thing, it will also create an chaos and things like that. Okay, yeah. But still I'm going to utilize this kind of like a way of control mechanism in the classroom, because the scenario is kind of like considered as a classroom. Okay, yeah. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna turn off the light and things like that, and I'm gonna say I will only turn on the fan and light when you stop screaming or things like that. If I say this thing, after a couple of time, people are kind of like this stop screaming or things, or they're kind of like a shutdown they sit down and things like that, and then I will everything will gonna peace happen. Then I will turn on the light and fan. All right, yeah. Now basically is this thing now. I also think this thing that if you want food, okay, yeah, you have to kind of like listen to me. Okay, yeah. Like basically if I'm gonna say that you will kind of like get the food if you understand if you understand my lecture very quietly. Okay, yeah. Now basically I kind of like said this thing, then I kind of like teach them a trigonometry lesson regarding about the sine, cos, theta and things and that I kind of like teach them. Now basically is this thing, if I kind of like teach them and things like that, and if the people would kind of like simply listen and understand, how do I supposed to know that all the people could understand and things like that? I will kind of like give them a kind of like a random test. Okay, yeah, like a kind of like a test that kind of like a 5 question, which answer would be really good and really good night. Now people are kind of like putting the right answer, then I will kind of like give them a kind of like some lunch, so that they should supposed to be eat and things like that. Now the people who didn't really kind of like correct the right answer, then I will not gonna give them a kind of like some food and things like that. Now they will understand that next time I have to be kind of like learn more, so that I would kind of like somebody answer the right question, so that I would get the food and things like that. Now do you understand this scenario? What I'm trying to tell you is this thing, when you have the chaos situation, you have to provide, or you have to kind of like showcase authority, not using a weapon, but kind of like using a kind of like a control mechanism. That you have to control door, you have to control the switchboard and things like that. You have to control the kind of like a lunch and things and that. So that basically people will gonna listen to you, and you have authority, that you have to kind of like guide them to the right direction and things like that. Okay, yeah. So do you understand? This control are really essential for all the people in the classroom. Should supposed to be stay silent, should supposed to be kind of like learn what I'm saying, things that. This is the exact situation actually happened in the 1947. Okay, exactly, not exactly, but kind of like somewhat something. You understand the scenario, because in that particular context, in the India 1947, people are so crazy, different ethnicity of the people, different religions of the people come from different things and language and stuff like that. It's very hard to be a maintain as a kind of like only one country and things. which is very difficult for you. So as a government, as a me, I am a government of the India, what should I supposed to do is that I should supposed to be kind of like a give them a kind of like a control environment. Okay, yeah, that if you wanted to grow or if you wanted to make your life little bit better, then you have to do this thing, you have to ask the permission and things like that. Now welcome License Raj. Now this, after this, License Raj happened. Like basically, yeah, License Raj, what is actually the License Raj? A License Raj is a kind of like a things that usually is this thing, the people are who are kind of like a simply asking permission from the government that should be supposed to kind of like a make 100 mobiles or kind of like computers or things or that. Even if like if only if you kind of like assembly make those kind of like assembly products or things when you get the permission. If you didn't really get the permission, you are not able to make this thing, you are not able to kind of like a make motorcycle, you are not able to make kind of like a computer and things like that. Even if you have a raw materials and skills and everything, but you can't because you don't have authority from the government and things like that. Now this is called kind of like a simply Raj, License Raj, where kind of like a government would control everything that people, this country should supposed to be intact and things like that. And because of this thing, government are mainly focus on kind of like simply one of the biggest problem is a hunger problem, that we should supposed to stop the hunger problem, that everyone should supposed to get the food at least twice in a thing. Now let me tell you one thing. I'm belong to the, like basically you are kind of, I don't know when you are kind of like listening this thing, okay, but License Raj is a not good thing. Like it's a completely bad thing, right? It's completely bad thing. Okay, because of the License Raj, kind of like assembly people are not really getting any kind of like a permission to kind of like a do things and that. It's kind of like a limit the growth, right? Yeah. But try to understand from government point of perspective, then you realize that why does government did that thing is because of that the situation at the time is not feasible. Like literally government will gonna tear apart in multiples of country, which will kind of like eventually broke the country in half or multiples in parts and things like that. Okay, basically Pakistan and Bangladesh, these are the kind of like some famous example, but still India will be also have multiple ethnicity of the people and things like that. So which is kind of like a very difficult to be a united as a India as a country. So that's why as the authority of the kind of like classroom, I have to be kind of like a provide a control so that people should supposed to be listen to me, and that control means License Raj, that everyone should supposed to ask the permission from me so that I will kind of like decide that what should you supposed to do and things and that. Okay, this is called kind of like License Raj. Now why am I kind of like explain this stuff and history stuff and things like that? Like you have to like let me explain so that you would try to understand. Okay, now because of License Raj, what will exactly happen, that the foreign company will not come to the India. Okay, yeah, definitely not. One thing. Another thing is that foreign country did not come to the India because of kind of like some Indian government are kind of like somebody having the limited resources or things or that, and the domestic country are kind of like also kind of like somebody not growing that much because of the License Raj and things like that, because it's somewhat something really essential for the government to kind of like make control and things like that. All right, get it? Now because of this thing, because of this kind of like assembly License Raj, foreign countries does not entered in our kind of like assembly the economy, which is kind of like a somewhat something not good. Like if I'm kind of like looking back, I realize that this is not really good, but it's somewhat something good for the domestic company. Okay, yeah, like right now we have Mahindra, right now we have Tata company, right now we have kind of like a bunch of multiples of kind of like a startup which kind of like established like Ashok Leyland and things like that, which is actually domestic company which kind of like help us to kind of like grow and things like that. If the Indian economy kind of like allow foreign company to business in here, then probably our domestic company will gonna destroy and things like that. Now why should we supposed to protect domestic company? Okay, is because of that a domestic company, the revenue of the company stay in the, sorry about the, I kind of like a disturb a lot. Okay, whatever. So what was I kind of like trying to tell you? I was trying to tell you is this thing that sorry, hello, is it audible? Yeah, it's the waveform is actually going on, so it's audible. Alright, yeah. So what is actually what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, License Raj. Okay, So because of, why do we supposed to protect the domestic company, is because of that the revenue of the company will kind of like a comes to the India. Let's just understand. Okay, yeah, Apple is an American brand, American company. Whatever the revenue is kind of like a generated from India, some revenue kind of like a spend in India too, because of the kind of like a factory or things and that, but most of the revenue went to US. Okay, yeah, like I don't know how this thing actually happened regarding about, or I'm not really sure the information exactly right, but probably somewhat something kind of like a money went to the US too. Why? Because this kind of like a brand is actually come from US, so most of the revenue is actually comes to their country because the brand is actually from that country, right? Yeah. So when this thing actually happened, if the government, if the Indian government are allow Indian economy to kind of like entered in foreign company or things and that, then probably most of the revenue actually kind of like went to the other countries, and basically Indian domestic companies are not gonna flourish. They will not have revenue, they will not have anything, the people will stay poorer and things like that, which is not really good thing. Okay, yeah, so probably it is, that's why they kind of like a block this thing. But that is not the kind of like only case, because there are multiple things, like basically India is kind of like a very much fragile, like basically at this moment, if we try to imagine this particular scenario, then we realize that Lyson Raj is really fucked up. But in that particular scenario and consequences and the people who are there and their thought process, these kind of like a concept with somewhat something kind of like a simply legit, kind of like a right, probably. As I mentioned, right and wrong thing is not kind of like a simply right and wrong thing is not actually exist. It's kind of like a simply depend upon what is actually right thing for how many right people, or wrong thing for how many wrong people. Like basically this thing na, the concept of the right and wrong thing is not determined by the kind of like simply the right and wrong. It determined by the how many people consider this thing is actually right, consider that thing right. If multiple people thinks this is wrong, then this is actually wrong. Example is this thing that ki I am a kind of like some human and I killed another human. This is kind of like a wrong thing. Why? Because of that ki everyone people actually consider this thing that killing somebody is actually wrong, so it is wrong. But if the lion is actually killed the tiger, if the lion are kind of like a hunting and he killed that deer or things like that, then in that particular sequence, that kind of like assembly, the lion did something wrong? No, he did not did something real wrong, because he was kind of like doing this for survival. So basically if I kill somebody, I consider as a wrong, but a tiger kills somebody or lion kills somebody, it considered as a right, is different. Okay, do you understand? The right and wrong mechanism is not depend upon the killing, is depend upon that ki how many people consider that is right or wrong. Okay, yeah, if I kill somebody, it was considered as a wrong, but a tiger or lion kill somebody, then probably it considered as a right, because there has a kind of like a reason for that. All right, now what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, why I'm kind of like mention this right and wrong concept, is because of that you have to understand the scenario from that point of perspective. From 1947, at that time people are kind of like crumbling regarding about how are you supposed to manage the economy and things and there are so many problems that happened. So at that time Lyson Raj is the only one thing that they realized that they should supposed to be kind of like keep them. Now it create the multiple consequences that a domestic company actually flourish, and that's why we are actually seeing the Tata, Reliance, Mahindra, these are kind of a company are actually established and they are kind of like doing really good, and they are kind of like somebody putting the kind of like a competition to a foreign company for like the advancement that this thing actually happened. Okay, yeah. Now let me tell you one thing. In 1991, okay, yeah, the liberalization actually happened in India. Okay, yeah, in the liberalization, foreign country are allowed to kind of like simply do economy in our country or things like that. Okay, yeah, which kind of like leads to growth. Okay, yeah, as I mentioned, license company kind of like simply make them a cap or make them kind of like restrict the growth in somewhat some context. But when you kind of like liberalize, when you kind of like simply make sure the foreign country should supposed to be kind of like do business in your economy and things like that, because your country does not have everything. Obviously you need something from something country. So each foreign country will kind of like provide something that kind of like add value, which create the which create the kind of like assembly employment. Will people will kind of like get a job, and they will kind of like assembly spend some sort of amount of money in kind of like buying products, and the economic cycle will gonna continue with this thing. Okay, yeah. Now do you understand now why am I kind of like simply mention this thing? Why am I kind of like mention this particular history scenario and economic subjects and things like that? Why I'm saying this thing? Because I think that for the Adam simulation, you have to understand the kind of like assembly simulation process. Because I think that this particular concept that most of people actually understand, most of people kind of like resonate and things and that. Okay, now imagine a scenario, imagine a particular scenario that key basically I am basically I am the government of India and I have Adam simulation. Okay, now what does Adam simulation will gonna do? Okay, now imagine I am the government of India in 1947. I have Adam simulation. This is a kind of like a software or kind of like a something that I have. Okay, now what does it do is that I kind of like a somebody I want to kind of like a somebody that I want to grow my country. Okay, so I'm gonna put the prompt that my country, I'm government of the India, I wanted to kind of like grow my country and things and that, but I also want to be kind of like somebody domestic player should supposed to be rise up, as well as kind of like somebody I also get the kind of like a rozgar for the people, the employment, so that they will get a job and things and that. I kind of like put the prompt, hit the enter. Now what this Adam simulation will gonna do? Adam simulation will kind of like simulate the scenario that what will gonna happen in the future. Right now future is not happened. Like basically I'm talking about the scenario from 1947, and basically it kind of like create the scenario that what will gonna happen and things and that. If the license raj will gonna happen, then probably domestic company will rise up, but international company will not gonna rise up. Then probably is this thing that the employment will gonna gone and things and that. So basically what does it gonna do? It kind of like went through multiples of kind of like a scenario or multiples of possibility that how do we supposed to make our country much more better and things like that. Each scenario kind of like learn from something, that if something happened, then what kind of like consequences will wrong. Each thing will gonna happen, like basically if I kind of like put the license raj, then what will gonna consequences will gonna happen, and stuff like that. So this is kind of like an Adam simulation will kind of like give me a kind of like a run from multiple possibilities, run from multiples of possibility that what will gonna happen and things and that. And then after that Adam simulation will kind of like give me a kind of like one scenario or kind of like a couple of kind of like a possibility that might kind of like somebody your country will kind of like grow into the future. It's a kind of like a thing that have you seen a movie named Avenger Infinity War? In the Avenger Infinity War, Doctor Strange is actually seen kind of like a millions of possibility, and he only kind of like have only one possibility that he says that in that one possibility that we actually kind of like kill the Thanos and things like that. Okay, this is what exactly the Adam simulation will gonna do. Adam simulation will kind of like try to create the kind of like multiples of simulations and multiples of kind of like possibility that what kind of like things actually happened, this happened, and then it kind of like do you understand the entire mechanism of the kind of like a simulation, things like that. It kind of like predict the future. Okay, now how do we supposed to predict the future? Okay, how do we supposed to predict the future? Obviously is this thing, it's not can we predict the future? No, we can't. Can anyone predict the future? No, can't. Can machine predict the future? Definitely no, right? But what if I say we are wrong? No, we can predict the future. Okay, so how we should supposed to predict the future? Okay, like it's not me predicting the future, like we are predicting the future, like you can do predict the future too. How? Imagine a scenario, whatever you are, what kind of like a personality that you have, what kind of like a routine that you have. Okay, I'm gonna take I'm not really sure about you, but I'm gonna predict my future. I'm gonna predict my tomorrow, what will gonna happen. Okay, so I'm gonna predict that tomorrow I will gonna wake up at 7 a.m. Okay, 7 or 7:30 a.m. Okay, I will kind of like assembly do my potty, brush my teeth and things and that. Okay, yeah. Then I make my breakfast. I also have to make the breakfast for my family. Okay, yeah. Like not entire breakfast, but somewhat kind of like I do little bit of help to kind of like make breakfast to my help to I provide help to my mother to make the breakfast and things like that. Then probably at maybe 9 or 9:30 I will kind of like started reading my book. Okay, I read book for half an hour. Okay, then after that I will record my artifact. It also kind of like a take maybe kind of like a half an hour. So probably I would start reading my book at 9 a.m. I would kind of like a read till half an hour, means 9:30. Then probably 10 minutes for kind of like a somewhere. Then maybe kind of like a something 9:45 I might start recording artifact. I will gonna record artifact for at least like a half an hour or maybe kind of like a 10-15 hour regarding about the kind of like some the question that I ask and how much important that I should supposed to provide and things like that. Okay, I will record my artifact. Okay, yeah. Then I will what we're gonna do is that I have to kind of like mop the floor. Okay, yeah. So I will gonna mop the floor for at least like maybe half an hour because yeah, things and that. Then I will kind of like assembly the shower and then I will kind of like assembly eat my lunch. Okay, and at maybe kind of like assembly 12:30 or maybe 1 a.m. I will kind of like sit in front of my desk and started doing my editing work. Okay, yeah. I will kind of like continue my editing work till maybe kind of like a 6:30 or maybe 6. Okay, yeah. Then I will kind of like went into the kind of like assembly the something like the kind of like a workout. I will do workout. I will gonna run for half an hour. Then I will kind of like play badminton with my friend. Okay, yeah. I also spend time with my friends too. Little bit feel really good. Okay, yeah. I came home tomorrow at maybe 8:30 p.m. When I came, I will kind of like a shower. Then after that, I will kind of like eat my dinner. Then I will gonna record my artifact. And at maybe kind of like a 10 or maybe 10:30 I will kind of like sit in front of my desk and kind of like do my remaining work. Okay, yeah. And at 12 p.m. I will kind of at 12 a.m. I will kind of like simply shut down my PC and then I went to sleep. Okay, yeah. Now this is a kind of like simply the future that I predict. Okay, yeah. Which is somewhat something 80 to 90% which is true, right? Yeah. Why? Because it's a kind of like a things like basically everyday life is not kind of like a chaotic or not kind of like a something cinematic that every day is kind of like a very much different. Because of that, why do I kind of like a predict? Because I follow the routine. I kind of like a follow some sort of thing that I should supposed to do and things and that, right? Now basically also you do the same thing too. Okay, yeah. Who you are, what kind of like a person you are kind of like a doing some sort of thing that every day that you do, and tomorrow you are kind of like a doing the same thing which is kind of like a somewhat something maybe 70 to 80% right. Okay, might be something changed, might be you kind of like a wake up at 9:30 a.m. or things like that, but possibly almost like a 70 to 80% that you could predict the future very rightly. Okay, yeah. So what exactly is this thing? How do we predict the future? Is because of our backend data. Okay, yeah. Like basically in the back in my history, did I wake up at 7:30 or did I wake up at 8:30 or did I wake up at 9:30? Did I kind of like follow the routine? Did I read my book? Did I run 30 minutes or not? Because of kind of like something, I have my entire history information at my brain and things like that, so that I know what I will gonna do and things like that. Okay, yeah. So do you understand what I'm saying? Is this thing that backend data or kind of like a history data is kind of like a determine that key, how do I supposed to predict the future? How do I supposed to kind of like a predict that next thing, what should I supposed to do and things and that. Get it? Okay, yeah. So the backend data is also really essential for kind of like somebody predicting what should we supposed to do. Right? Yeah. Now basically Adam, how do we supposed to do? As I mentioned, Adam is a kind of like a simulation or kind of like a software or things like that. So how does it kind of like something happen in the backend? How what kind of like somebody information that it kind of like get? Information, yeah. Data is very much essential thing. So basically there are kind of like if the Adam simulation actually happened, if the Adam kind of like creates the multiples of possibility or millions of possibility, it really required a data. Okay, yeah. I need two kind of like a data. How? जाऊ का तू घेऊन जाऊ सायकल घेऊन जातो सोडून देतो येतो मग मी पण मी जेवायला येऊन जाईल तिकडे जेवायला येऊन जाईल तिकडे
आणि गाडी आणा
sorry about the pause. Okay, I was kind of like assembly. Am I recording properly? Yeah, it's been 49 minutes 18 minutes, sorry 49 minutes 20 seconds. I'm kind of like continue this recording because the stuff that I wanted to talk, which is kind of like a somewhat something matter, which is somewhat something kind of like a something essential for at least like a creating a blueprint to for Adam. Okay, because I wanted to create the Adam simulation, and for this particular thing I need to understand this concept more and more. Okay, because it will definitely gonna add value in so many levels to the human, to the people, to the community, to the society in much more better way. Okay, yeah. But it also kind of like creates a chaos consequences too, and I want to make sure that these consequences should not supposed to be happen. So I have to be understand this simulation in much more in detail way. So let's just understand first. I kind of like somebody mention that key. Where was I? I was kind of like somebody mentioning regarding about what is happening. Let me do some sort of like I have to do my lagvi, and I want to do a little bit susu. Okay, so let me do susu. All right, am I recording? Yeah. While I was doing a susu, okay, I was kind of like looking at if somebody is actually watching to be or not. Okay, why? Because basically this thing, I didn't really went to bathroom to do susu. I kind of like assembly, like I was at the rooftop na, so I was kind of like assembly getting more lazy to kind of like went to the bathroom and kind of like do susu. So I kind of like assembly take the corner of my rooftop and did susu. Am I wrong? Am I did something wrong? I don't know. Probably, yeah. Like it's just the age, and I just kind of like did this thing. No, you shouldn't supposed to do this thing. It's a very wrong thing. You have bathroom, and you should supposed to be go to the susu in bathroom. Whatever. Okay, yeah. So what was I kind of like? Wait, first of all, is it recording? Yeah, it's recording already. Yeah. So what was I'm kind of like trying to tell you? Okay, what is at least this thing? Data. Yeah, as I mentioned, is this thing that if this simulation really required, it really required a kind of like some data, the information, as I mentioned, the information regarding about the government of the India, information regarding about what does individual people actually thinks and stuff like that. Okay, and this is very essential because of that thing you are kind of like a simulation requires two kind of like a data. Okay, first of all, human intervention, okay, yeah, and machine intervention. Now why do I kind of like establish this machine intervention and human intervention? Okay, first of all is that if I wanted to simulate this thing, that simulation, the whatever the kind of like consequences are consequences for the human, right? Like basically if I wanted to do kind of like make my country a little better or things, or if I wanted to do any kind of like assembly policy and things and that, the consequences are kind of like basically the final consequences are actually faced by human. Okay, they kind of like somebody get all those things. Okay, yeah, so it's actually meant for humans na. While I'm kind of like doing this thing like a right thing and wrong thing, which are kind of like the final thing is actually happened to the humans. Okay, so human thought process are really essential. So human intervention are also really essential too, because the humans are not only make their life is really good, as well as they make their life is really vulnerable or miserable too, because of this thing that it's a kind of like a thing that they have both, both means what, I don't know how to supposed to explain. Okay, what is actually stuff that I'm saying? Okay, if I'm the government of the India in 1947, and if I have the Haddam simulation and I wanted to simulate this thing, that how do I supposed to run my country in much more better way and things like that. Now this is kind of like I put the prompt and things like that. That prompt will not gonna execute. Why? Because it doesn't really have data. It doesn't really have information regarding about the people, because the people are really essential. What does they think, what does they have, what does they, it's a, like as I mentioned now, the kind of like a simply history, the data, the information, like basically if I could predict the future is because of that ki I have backend data, I know myself and things and that. So that's why I kind of like a predict my tomorrow, right? Yeah, so this is kind of like a somebody, the machine Adam will simulation will kind of like a predict the tomorrow what will gonna happen. For that tomorrow it really required a kind of like a backend information regarding about what does people thinks and that, what does they have kind of like a backend information, but not exactly is it. Okay, not exactly the entire information, kind of like a simply required a kind of like a, like basically I kind of like a simply mention that my backend information, that how do I do, I didn't really mention my name or things and that, but I kind of like mention my routine, that what I do when I wake up and things and that, which kind of like help me to predict the future consequences or future possibility, that how do I supposed to do this thing. Okay, so backend data is really essential, a kind of like simply history data, okay, or information is really essential. Okay, yeah. So how do I supposed to extract that information? Okay, yeah. First of all, information about humans. Okay, yeah. We need, if I wanted to develop this Adam simulation, I need information about the human. I need information about the what does and how does people think. Okay, and this is very really essential. But how do I supposed to get this information? Okay, yeah. Now for this thing, I have a kind of like a simply a source, which is kind of like a really good Artifact. I wanted to establish a company named Artifact. Okay, yeah. Adam will kind of like somebody I will gonna do after the Artifact. Okay, because Artifact is very essential. If I build the Artifact, okay, yeah, Artifact, if the like now I'm kind of like a recording my Artifact. Okay, yeah. So basically, if the everyone kind of like a recording Artifact and things like that, I will have entire information about the user, what they think and things, stuff like that. But make sure I'm kind of like making sure that I will not have the information about the name, about where they're born or their mobile number. No, I will not have this information. I don't need that information as also. I need information regarding about how does human think. Okay, what does their thought process and things like that, without knowing your name and things like that, nothing at all. And basically my system, my Artifact will kind of like a run by AI, okay, which kind of like eliminate, like what is actually is this thing Artifact. Like I mentioned regarding about Artifact a lot multiple times in my Artifact episode. Okay, yeah, so I will not gonna mention regarding about Artifact, but I'm gonna talk about the Adam simulation here. Okay, I'm not gonna talk about the Artifact. Okay, yeah. So basically whatever the information that I will gonna get, I will human intervention, the information that I get is actually from Artifact. Okay, is actually from Artifact. Okay, in the Artifact you will get the kind of like entire information about the human intervention, because the simulation actually happened from human intervention. Like basically human intervention means like that humans are kind of like simply intervene to create the simulation and kind of like things like basically this simulation should supposed to be run, like basically it kind of like gives you a kind of like simply multiple steps of guideline, that what kind of like consequences should supposed to be much better to kind of like grow your economy and things like that, a kind of like simply advisory. Okay, and that advisory is actually followed by the people, right? So basically human intervention are really essential to kind of like simply create the kind of like a simulation and things like that. But human intervention is not the only one thing I need another thing, machine intervention. Now what's a machine intervention? Machine intervention means like that na ki, as I mentioned, is this thing that ki, like obviously I will not gonna run this simulation in 1947 when, like obviously not, I will gonna run this, like I will gonna create this Adam simulation in the future, like probably 10-20 future year after. So after 25 year, like basically imagine that if I kind of create the Adam simulation after the 25 year, okay, yeah, so in that particular timeline machine will control most of the things, like AI and things and that, okay, yeah. So I need information about the machine. Okay, yeah. Now how is that thing? Okay, yeah, like basically how is exactly is this thing machine, stuff like that. Okay, so It's a very hard to explain at this moment. This information is not might not kind of like exactly right or exactly, I'm not really sure what kind of like information do I need, but at this moment I think that I might need a human intervention information that I get from the artifact. But machine information I kind of like get from internet scrapping, or yeah. But it's not really good thing to kind of like get, because whatever the information that I get from the internet is not a kind of like something very exact in detail. If I need any kind of like somebody machine information, then there is only one source that I will get from the machine information, is from the Google. Okay, yeah, because the Google is the only one thing that kind of like somebody how entire information regarding about the machine as well as user and things and that. I think that na ki basically if I would combine artifact and Google together, then the Atom will kind of like a power all those things, because Google have the power of not only have the power, not only they have the information about the user, but they also have information regarding about the machines, which is really essential, because the user data is actually kind of like enrolled through machines and things and that. Like, what is actually machine? What I'm trying to tell you? What is actually this thing? Okay, yeah. If the simulation really required a kind of like assembly, there are multiples of kind of like consequences happen. Is human does not intervene, like as I mentioned the previous kind of like consequences that I mentioned, that key the particular person is kind of like arrive at late because of the traffic, and obviously that traffic is not kind of like a defined by the human, is actually defined by the something consequences happen, like a basically tire get puncture or things or that and that. No, like there are multiples of consequences. Okay, yeah. Obviously is this thing that traffic is not like basically in the future machine will gonna intervene a lot in multiples of human activity. Okay, yeah. So obviously I need a kind of like some machine intervention, that how does machine thinks. Okay, how does machine thinks and that, and what better way to kind of like somebody Google is kind of like something one of the best thing that I would kind of like get the entire information from the Google, because Google have entire information regarding about machine and user data and things like that, and and also kind of like information regarding about the everything, like a Google has a spread all across the kind of like internet and things like that. And basically if I wanted to scrap the internet for the machine intervention, for the machine intervention information, so I cannot kind of like rely on kind of like internet, because internet is not in detail. Google is only one thing that I will get the entire information regarding about how the user behave, how does user act and things and that, so that basically I will kind of like get that information from the Google and kind of like a human information from the artifact, and then I will run the Atom simulation. Okay, yeah. If I run the Atom simulation, then I will kind of, but still there are so many consequences that will gonna happen. Like basically if I run that simulation, there are multiples of kind of like a simulation, multiples of consequences will gonna happen. Like sometime it gonna went to the kind of like a thousands of simulations, sometime it went to millions of simulation, millions kind of like some billions and things like that. And if such thing will gonna happen, like a millions and billions of simulation, dude, it just kind of like a machine will kind of like a fucked up, and it will not gonna kind of like execute that prompt. Definitely not, because as I mentioned the simulation is kind of like a giving the a step-by-step kind of like a guideline that how do you supposed to do this thing, is because of the predicting the kind of like the predicting the future regarding about the kind of like a backend information that they have from the kind of like the human intervention and machine intervention and things like that. But still I'm not really sure. Okay, yeah. But if such thing will gonna happen, if the Atom simulation I built, then it and basically it will gonna predict the, it will not gonna predict the kind of like the what will gonna future of tomorrow, nothing really at all. But and obviously it will not gonna work like that way. Okay, definitely, because Atom doesn't really have the information about you. No, it have the information regarding about the community which actually get from the artifact. Okay, and artifact are kind of like a scraping your does not kind of like a take your personal information. It takes the information about you, how do you supposed to behave, what is your emotion, your thought process. It actually what I'm saying is this thing, a thought process. Like basically this thing, my name is Saurabh Bothare, my mobile number is 737848470, my Gmail ID is monuauthore25@gmail.com. So these are my details, but these are not my thought process. My thought process is that what I think, what I execute, what is actually my coping mechanism, how do I supposed to react when the scary thing actually happen and things like that. These information I need to kind of like execute the kind of like Atom simulation to kind of like make the simulation much more better and multiple scenario. I'm not really sure how to, it's very sounds so confusing. I'm not really sure how do I supposed to execute this thing, but I think I will gonna do this thing because it will gonna add value in so many levels of the people. Like basically in the future, basically if any government wants to execute any kind of like a policy, they will kind of like run that policy before it execute to the parliament, before it execute to the people and things like that. It'll run that policy into a simulation, and that simulation actually giving the kind of like a feedback that if you run this policy, then probably in the future it might kind of like a showing really good things at the beginning, but at the kind of like after 20 or after a couple of years, things might be create a chaos and things like that. So you have to do this thing so that that chaos will not gonna happen. Like basically Adam simulation will kind of like actually solve the problem before it's create, because it kind of like creates the problem in virtual environment, in simulation environment, right? So this is what kind of like Adam will gonna do. Okay, yeah. So, and when this thing actually happened, then probably government will gonna create such a policy that kind of like not only kind of like add a value to the people, but as well as kind of like add a value to the for the longer period of time too, in multiple sector. Not only the government, but as well as kind of like a company kind of like create any kind of like a policy so that their company should supposed to provide value to the economy or kind of like some people's life and things and that. It does that thing too because it kind of like simulate their stuff. So this is what is it. This is what kind of like things will gonna happen and stuff like that. But still, the future that I'm thinking, like if I'm thinking about the Adam simulation, it's not easily possible. But I don't know. I'm not really sure about anything at all, because the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong. I'm just kind of like only whatever the information that I have at the moment till this date. Okay, yeah. In the future, this might be changed, but right now, this is the information that I have, and I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to execute this Adam simulation. But this is kind of like create a blueprint, or kind of like a raw structure format, so that I would kind of like simply make a mistake, learn from that mistake, make my skeleton bit bigger, kind of like simply stronger, and things like that, so that I would kind of like establish the Adam in much more better. Right? Yeah. One question. Yeah. Why do you name as Adam? Oh yeah, why do I name as Adam? Okay, Adam is kind of like something the first human on planet Earth. Okay, the name of the it's not a kind of like simply first human actually. Okay, yeah, because the Bible says this thing that from Bible point of perspective, the God he actually came and he kind of like make the first human, and that name is Adam, and first woman is Eve. Okay, yeah. Why I kind of like put as a kind of like a name as Adam, because of that it's a Adam simulation is a kind of like something machine. Yeah, it's a kind of like a machine which is kind of like a first human. Okay, a first human, because the way that Adam behave like a human in the machine format. So I think that that's why I kind of like make this Adam as a kind. That's why I kind of like put the name as Adam, because it's a machine, but a first human machine. But it might be kind of like completely wrong, because probably I'm not really sure. It just might. I think that, but I don't know what will gonna happen. I haven't really seen the future. Okay, yeah. If I'm gonna predict my tomorrow. I'm not gonna predict my kind of like a 10 year after what we're gonna do. Definitely not. Okay, yeah. Adam simulation will gonna do this thing, but how does Adam simulation will do? Like basically, yeah, it does have information. I don't know how it happened. It's just, I have a lot of questions regarding about will it be possible or not. But oh boy, whatever. I should supposed to be end here. This is it. It's been almost like a 1 hour 7 minute. I'm gonna talking right now this shit stuff. Whatever. Thank you.